What if the most futuristic electric car company in America never actually makes a car? Aptera was supposed to revolutionize the EV market. Solar-powered, ultra-efficient, and light enough to glide on sunlight alone. But behind the glossy marketing and endless promises, something far darker is unfolding. Today, we uncover the shocking truth. And it's even worse than anyone thought. About a month ago, we released a detailed report on Aptera, a company that once captured imaginations with its ambitious vision of a three-wheeled solar EV. Founded in 2006, Aptera promised a new era of transportation, ultra-light, energy-efficient, and decades ahead of its time. But that dream fizzled fast. The company shut down in 2011 without delivering a single vehicle. Then, in 2019, the original founders resurrected the brand, claiming they had learned from past mistakes. This time, they raised over $135 million through equity crowdfunding. Thousands of everyday investors poured in their savings, believing they were funding the future of sustainable mobility. But 6 years later, Aptera still doesn't have a production-ready vehicle. Their first deliveries were promised for 2021. It's now 2025, and all they have are prototypes, delays, and a shrinking pool of investors. Our first investigation didn't sit well with everyone. One YouTuber, a devoted Aptera shareholder named Steve, runs a channel dedicated to defending the company. He posted a response video claiming our analysis was riddled with factual errors. But rather than refuting any point, Steve took a different approach, questioning our credibility instead of the facts. Ironically, he accused us of using AI to write and voice our video. The truth? None of our videos are AI scripted. And honestly, it's easier to question the messenger than confront the uncomfortable reality. Still, we watched Steve's latest interview with Aptera's co-CEO, Chris Anthony, and what we discovered shocked even us. The situation inside Aptera is far worse than we previously imagined. Aptera has spent years showcasing validation vehicles, essentially test units that don't represent the final product. In June 2025, they unveiled their latest version, called Artemis. This wasn't meant for production, but for testing. The next step, they said, would be to create Gemini, the model intended for actual manufacturing. But Gemini doesn't exist yet. To produce it, Aptera needs to redesign or source every single part from scratch in a way that's scalable for mass production. And they're nowhere close. One moment from Steve's interview with Chris Anthony says it all. When asked about the status of something as basic as the vehicle's glass hatch, the CEO seemed completely unaware. He stuttered through the question, vaguely mentioning tooling costs and admitting he didn't even know where that component stood in production. This isn't a massive company juggling dozens of models. Aptera has one vehicle, and its co-CEO can't tell investors where a core part is. That's alarming. Aptera's biggest claim to fame was its 1,000-mile range and its ability to charge itself via solar panels. It sounded revolutionary, an electric vehicle that could practically power itself. But years later, there's no proof those claims are realistic. In March 2025, Aptera released limited test data from its Hermes prototype, boasting energy efficiency of 122 watt-hours per mile, about half of what a Lucid Air consumes. On the surface, that sounds incredible, until you realize that comparing a two-seat, three-wheeled autocycle to a luxury five-seater sedan is meaningless. It's like bragging that a bicycle uses less fuel than a truck. Technically true, but completely irrelevant. Worse still, the company has refused to release updated range or solar data for its next-gen prototypes. Every time someone asks, they deflect with vague promises about official channels and future updates. Translation: they don't have the numbers or don't want to share them. When Steve asked Chris Anthony for a timeline on the Gemini's completion or its real-world specifications, Anthony gave a rambling, evasive response. He spoke about compliance, capabilities, and communication channels, but failed to provide a single concrete detail. It wasn't an answer, it was an evasion. And that has become Aptera's entire communication strategy. Talk a lot, say nothing. This pattern repeats again and again. The leadership speaks in circles about growth, optimism, and long-term vision, but never addresses the hard reality. Aptera has burned through most of its funding and still doesn't have a product. Let's talk money, because that's where the real story lies. Aptera's primary funding source is retail crowdfunding, meaning everyday investors can buy small shares in the company. It's democratized investing, but there's a catch. Crowdfunding brings small amounts of money slowly, while manufacturing an EV requires massive upfront capital. In 2024, Aptera attempted to fix this by selling $60 million in convertible bonds to institutional investors. They managed to sell just 618,000, about 1% of their goal. Why? Because serious investors don't see a viable business model here. Even more concerning, a year later, Aptera filed new SEC documents claiming they now needed $60 to $70 million to reach low-volume production, and that even if they secured it, production would take 12 to 18 months. So the costs are rising, the timeline is stretching, and the money is disappearing. When confronted about this in the interview, Chris Anthony again dodged, referencing some 3-year plan and hypothetical benefactors. None of it made sense. Meanwhile, Aptera's monthly burn rate sits between $1.2 and $1.5 million, including 6-figure executive salaries. In 2024, they raised just $23.5 million, a steep drop from the previous year. After transaction fees, their net intake barely covers operations. They're surviving month to month, but not progressing. When pressed about how they plan to raise more money, Chris Anthony again fell back on empty optimism. He mentioned new funding methods and crowdfunding innovations, even referencing the pandemic's impact on markets, without any specifics. In short, there is no strategy. Institutional investors have written Aptera off, and retail investors are running out of patience and money. Without a miracle injection of tens of millions, the company's vision will remain just that, a vision. At one point, Anthony insists that Aptera will succeed through grit and determination. But grit doesn't pay for tooling, engineering, or supply chains. Determination doesn't build production lines. Perhaps most tellingly, when the company unveiled its latest prototype, Artemis, at a major press event in June 2025, Chris Anthony wasn't even there. Instead, he was on vacation in Japan, enjoying ramen and family time. Now, there's nothing wrong with taking a break, but when your company is burning through millions, struggling to stay afloat, and hosting a make-or-break public event, it's not a great look when your co-CEO is missing in action. Aptera once symbolized hope, a clean energy startup with a radical design and passionate supporters. But that dream is fading fast. 6 years after its relaunch, Aptera has no production-ready prototype, no factory, no major investors, and leadership that can't answer the most basic questions. Meanwhile, crowdfunding dollars continue to pour in from small investors who believe they're backing the future. But at this rate, that future might never arrive. So where does this leave Aptera? A groundbreaking idea trapped in a cycle of overpromising, under-delivering, and endless delays. We want companies like Aptera to succeed. Innovation is vital. But innovation without execution is just expensive storytelling. What do you think? Is Aptera still a visionary underdog, or a slow-motion collapse dressed as progress? Share your thoughts below. And as always, thank you for watching.